Feelings of patriotism. Were there any other reasons why you joined the service?
Well, I guess I wanted to fly or be in aviation, but the primary reason and the major reason was we all had to go. This was our duty, and
You felt an obligation?
very much so.
Okay,
And it was an honor and a privilege to serve.
okay. All right, so was there any reason why you picked the branch that you picked? You went into the Army?
Well, the reason I picked the Air Corps was I was interested in aviation. I thought maybe there might be a future in aviation. And I had cousins who were flyers in the Air Corps. One cousin in particular.
Who was that?
His name was Armin Kalust. He was in the New Guinea when the war started. He was in before the war started. And
What did he do?
he was a flight engineer on B-17. And there were no armaments on the planes at that time.
Really?
And they used to go up to get the planes up in the clouds to avoid the Japanese air raids. He was shot down 7 times.
Really?
Unable to fight back because the planes were not armored at that time.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
And who were your other relatives in the Air Corps?
Well, there were five brothers. One was in the Marines all the way through. The other was in the Navy all the way through. And one of them who didn't have to go, he was married and had children. He joined the Merchant Marine and he was torpedoed on the first trip. And
Did he survive?
no, he did not survive.
Okay. All right. So you felt an interest in aviation. Had you ever flown before you
No.
in any kind of
No,
aircraft?
my first flight was when I was in the service.
Okay. Do you recall your first days in the service?
Well, the first days were in Fort Devens, and
What was that, basically paperwork?
yeah, being processed, getting uniforms handed out, shoes and whatnot, and they would guess your size, and usually they were pretty close in throwing out the right size,
Okay.
and it was exciting. We were kids, and it was something different. It was exciting.
How long were you at Devens?
I was in Devens, I guess about a week or two, I'm not sure.
Okay. Then you shipped out?
Yeah, then we went to Atlantic City, New Jersey for our basic training.
At Fort Dix?
No, Atlantic City.
Atlantic City?
Yeah.
Okay. And tell me about your boot camp or your training experience there.
Well, we were stationed in the hotels in Atlantic City,
Uh-huh.
and we did our marching on the boardwalk.
You did?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And
What did you do besides marching? Any?
We did marching. We used to go out to Brigantine for rifle practice.
Where's Brigantine?
It's it's about a half-hour march from Atlantic City.
You marched to Brigantine, did you?
Yeah,
Okay. What kind of weapons did you use?
mainly rifles, M1.
How did you do with the?
Pretty good.
Were you awarded any kind of badge or?
No, I was average sharpshooter.
Okay.
I was not expert or anything like that.
What else did you do besides march and go through weapons training?
Well, we had orientation classes on how to be a soldier, how to look like a soldier, proper etiquette.
To get you into the regular military life, introducing you to
Right,
military
yeah,
life.
introduction.
No specialist training of any sort.
No.
Okay. And how did you get through your boot camp?
Well, it was very good.
How did you get along with your troops?
Fine.
Fellow?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Great bunch of guys.
Really?
Oh, yes.
Did most of them intend to go into the Air Corps like you, or
Yes.
they did?
Actually, enlisted in the Air Corps.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you went to boot camp and you trained as people who intended to go into the Air Corps.
Right.
You were assigned to the Air Corps from the very time that you enlisted?
Yeah, because we
at
enlisted into the Air Corps, yeah.
Okay, all right. And at that time, the Air Corps was part of the U.S. Army,
Yes,
and your literature here indicates that you were in the Army of the United States, but the Air Corps of the Army.
right.
Okay. Now, after your, describe for me, if you will, how long you were at Atlantic City. Oh, how were the accommodations there?
Well, we were living in the hotels there. Of course, it was excellent.
How many people to a room?
Well, in a large room, there were probably 6 or 7. In a small room, maybe 2. But they were all sort of adjoining.
Yeah. So your experiences there were good.
Oh, yes.
And how was the food?
Food was good.
And were you given an opportunity to go into town on weekends and things like that?
Oh, yes.
You had a certain amount of freedom.
Oh, yes.
Was that also during your boot training?
Yes. And on Fridays, Glenn Miller used to play for us in our dining room.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, how did you like that?
Liked it very much.
Yeah, yeah. And so you saw him every Friday?
Well, most every Friday, yes.
Really?
Yep.
And what was the hotel's name, if you recall?
It was the Hotel President. It was way down at the end of the boardwalk, and it's no longer there.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay. So how long were you in that training?
About 3 months.
Okay. Where'd you go from there?
From there, I went to Amarillo, Texas.
Tell us about your trip down there. How'd you go, by train?
We went by train.
All of you together?
Well, some were shipped to other bases. A few of us went to Amarillo. It was an Army Air Force school, Army Air Corps school at Amarillo Army Airfield. And there we studied mechanics.
So before you left for Amarillo, did they tell you what you were going to be doing there?
Well, we knew we were going to go to mechanics school.
Mechanics school.
Yes, we were told that.
Okay. Did you have an opportunity to visit with your parents or come home before you went there, or did you
Yes.
go straight?
I had a 3-day pass.
And what did your parents think about that?
Well, of course, I was very happy. They were very happy.
It's sad to see you go.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, okay. And so then you went from Atlantic City to Amarillo?
Amarillo, Texas,
Okay.
yeah.
Tell us, how did Amarillo influence you? How'd you feel when you arrived there? What was it like?
Well, it was kind of cool. It was in March, and we were in barracks, which was fine. They were very nice barracks.
Wooden?
Wooden barracks, yeah. And we started school there, and I was amazed at how professionally we were taught. All the systems of the airplanes were on mock-ups. Besides classroom instructions, we were able to study these mock-ups and see actually how each system worked. We had hands-on training. It was very extensive training, very good training.
So when you talk about mock-ups, you mean they had models of
Yeah,
the
each
system of
system,
the
like the
plane?
hydraulic system would be up on a board, on a large board, or the electrical system.
Yeah, yeah.
And the instructors in their particular field, I thought were very good.
Were they military or civilian
No,
instructors?
they were for the most part civilian.
Civilian instructors?
There were women and men. And we actually participated on some of the airplanes that were there.
What kind of aircraft did you start on?
Well, they were mainly B-17s. And
How many B-17s did you have there? Approximately.
Oh, they were planes coming and going, but we probably had 3 or 4 B-17s in the hangar that we worked on. And, oh, there were probably a few others.
Okay. And incidentally, what was this base, what was the name of the base you went to?
Amarillo Army Airfield.
Okay.
Yeah.
And have you ever gone back there since you?
No, I've never been back there.
Right. So you had your instruction on the B-17.
Right.
And on the various, were you mostly with the mechanics, not with the fire control systems or anything else like that?
Well, we studied the flight control systems also.
Okay, I
We
was
did
talking
not-
about the
we
fire
did not
control.
fly, no.
Okay, you didn't do anything with the machine guns or anything else like that?
No.
Okay. And I think you said previously that the B-17s that we were using had no armament on them, were unarmed.
Well, I refer to the airplanes that were out in the Pacific at that time, when the war broke out. They didn't have ammunition as far as I know. They were just there. You know, they weren't expecting, I guess they were surprised when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. And, of course, the airplanes in the hangar were not armed.
They didn't have any machine guns on them or anything else like that?
Well, they had the turrets had guns in them, but there was no ammunition.
There was no ordnance?
No.
Right. Okay. Was there any particular part of your training that led you to a particular part of the aircraft system that you were interested in?
Well, I guess I was generally interested in the whole thing.
In the whole thing?
Yeah.
Okay. And how long was your training there at Amarillo?
Probably 4 months, 5 months.
Did you do any flying when you were there?
No.
And how was the supply situation? Did you have any problem with your supplies with regard to maintaining these aircraft?
No, because we were really not maintaining the aircraft, we were studying the aircraft. We would take things apart and put them together.
But you had training supplies. You didn't have a shortage of training materials.
Oh, yes, the training materials were 100%.
Really?
And actually, we could take an airplane carburetor apart and put it back together in the dark when we got through.
Really?
And they were pretty large. They're nothing like an automobile carburetor used to be.
Now, these were radial engines, weren't they?
Yes.
And radial engine is a pretty large engine.
Yeah.
Can you tell us if there was any relationship between a radial engine and an automobile engine that we know today?
Well, the principles of piston drive and so forth were probably essentially the same, internal combustion. But the radial had pistons going all around. And where on an automobile, the piston's either in line or V, and
You mentioned a carburetor. How many carburetors would a B-17 have?
well, each engine would have one.
Uh-huh. Okay.
And the carburetors were probably 1.5 by 1.5 and probably 1.5 high.
Really? That's a
Oh,
pretty
yeah.
large
Oh,
carburetor.
yeah.
And they take a lot of gasoline, don't they?
I think they burned about 50 gallons an hour.
Really?
Mm.
So a trip to Berlin burned an awful lot of fuel, didn't it?
I guess so.
Did you know what the endurance of the B-17 would be?
What do you mean, the endurance?
If you filled a B-17 up with complete fuel tanks, how long would it fly?
You know, I don't remember.
Any idea? 50 gallons an hour.
I don't remember how many gallons the tanks held. I think there were 2 tanks in each wing.
So,
It's hard to say.
and there were four.
I know they could fly across the ocean.
Yeah, because they had four engines, didn't they?
They had 4
Four engines going at full speed would be like 200 gallons an hour.
Right.
Yeah. So that's why we couldn't go too far without refueling, but they didn't have any refueling techniques.
That's right.
There was no way to pump gasoline into the fuel tanks from inside the plane
No.
to extend its range?
Well, if you wanted to get a larger range out of a plane, you'd have to put tanks into the bomb bay. And that didn't make any sense because you needed the bombs.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
But on cargo planes, there were tanks inside the,
Inside the aircraft?
yeah, particularly on the C-54, and you could transfer fuel
You could,
to any engine.
from inside the plane?
Right.
That would extend its range.
Oh, yes.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the closest we ever came to refueling in the air with any aircraft during World War II.
Right.
Wasn't it? Right. But they didn't think of doing that on the B-17. Of course, they didn't have much room there, did they?
There was not much room. You had
Yeah.
the bomb bay and
Okay. Did you keep a personal diary of your training or your service?
no.
And how were you with, so far as letter writing is concerned?
I'd probably write home maybe once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks.
Was that in English or
Oh, in English, yeah.
English?
Dear,
Your-
dear folks, how are you? I'm well.
Yeah.
Love, Betty.
Yeah.
That was it.
And did you take many photographs when you were in the service?
No, not really.
Not too many?
No.
Yeah. Of course, in those days, photography was not that popular.
Yeah, well, we, off duty, we might have taken photographs. I had permission once to take pictures on the base, but they were sensitive, of course.
Yeah. How was security with regard to where you served? How was security, say, at Devens or Atlantic City or at Amarillo?
Well, I wasn't too familiar with security, but I'm sure it was fine.
Yeah. You had no problem getting in and out of the base?
No.
Were you
as
given
long as you
security
had a-
badges?
Huh?
Were you given security badges?
We were given passes,
Passes?
yeah.
Okay. Nothing like today, of course. What did you think of your officers and fellow soldiers during this period?
Well, I think most of the fellows that I served with were very fine people from very nice homes.
So you had good relationships with your
Very
officers?
good relationships. And they were all very patriotic boys.
Okay. And then, following your training at Amarillo, were you given some kind of rating?
I don't remember.
Okay. It says here, Army Air Force Training School, Amarillo, Texas. Airplane and engine mechanic course, 16 weeks in 1943.
Right.
Does that jog your memory?
That's what I was talking about.
Yeah, so you
Yeah.
graduated as an A&E mechanic? Airplane and
Yes.
engine mechanic? Okay. And what was your rank at that time?
Private,
Private? Single stripe or no stripe?
single.
Single stripe.
No, I don't know. I guess I got a single stripe someplace along the line, but I don't remember when it was.
Okay. And then, following that, where'd you go? Kansas City?
I went to Kansas City. Yes, I went to Kansas City.
Says here 10 weeks in 1943.
Yeah, it was a TWA school.
Mhm.
And it was sort of a continuation.
What did you learn there?
Well, a
Same aircraft?
little more advanced, probably a little more about the principles of flight and
On any particular aircraft?
no, in general,
Mm-hmm.
in general,
So this didn't center on the B-17?
no.
Okay. So you went there for 10 weeks, And it says here that you were in a line mechanic course.
Yes.
And other than the principles of flight, do you recall anything else that you were taught? Like, did you do any flying?
No, no flying yet.
You're still on the line.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, following that, it says here that you went through the Army Air Force Douglas Aircraft Factory School in Santa Monica.
Yeah, after the TWA school in Kansas City, I was assigned to Newcastle Army Air Base in Wilmington, Delaware, where I became a online mechanic.
So this was way across the country again.
Yeah.
You went from Kansas City across to the East Coast?
To the East Coast, right.
Okay.
And after I was there for a while, I became a crew chief. And at that time, the C-54 was a relatively new airplane, and they were just starting to come through. So they took 4 of us from our base and sent us out to the Douglas factory, I think for maybe a month, 6 weeks, to study the airplane, how to run the engines, how to, the whole thing.
When you went out to Delaware, were there C-54s out there?
They were starting to come in. They were just starting.
Well, were you a crew chief on a C-54 out in Delaware?
Yeah, well, first I was a ground mechanic.
On what kind of
And then
aircraft? On what kind of aircraft?
Anything.
Anything?
Anything.
Okay.
And then I had my own crew. I became a crew chief on the ground. And then I became a flight engineer. And I was still a crew chief on the ground. I had about anywhere from 15 to 18 boys. We were all boys.
So any time that an aircraft would come in
Yeah.
of any type and it needed service, your crew would take care of that
Yes,
aircraft?
we were. There were several crews. We were an outside crew. We were not a hangar crew. We were an outside crew, and we handled. Mainly, we got pilot squawks on problems they had with the plane as they were, coming in, and we checked the log, see what needed to be done to the airplane. If it was major work, the airplane was assigned to hangar crew, to the hangar crews, where they could take it apart and so forth and so on. Our job was more making changes if there were if the engines were not running just right. Probably try to troubleshoot and find out what it was. Troubleshooting was part of it. And then we also did periodical inspections. All aircraft was inspected periodically. There were the 25-hour inspections, 50-hour inspections, 100-hour inspections. And we would change plugs. Sometimes the points on the magnetos would be pitted or something, which would cause a loss of RPM and so forth and so on. And it was our job to more or less find what the problem was. And if it was something that we could handle outside, we did it. We had nose hangers. We would have the airplane towed into a nose hanger, which sort of the nose of the airplane went in, and each nacelle, each engine would be in also. And if it was cold, we'd have heaters out there. And we did things like changing plugs, looking for leaks, and so forth, and that was our main function.
Did they have fuel and oil leaks in these engines? Was that a common experience?
Fuel, no. Fuel leak would be a real problem.
Yeah. But oil leaks?
It was always, we just always put a drip pan under the engines because there was always a few drops of oil under the engines.
Yeah, but no serious?
No, nothing serious.
Okay. And this was with regard to any aircraft that, came into
Right.
Delaware? Okay.
Eventually, it became mainly C-54 base.
And what was the name of the base that you were at?
It was called Newcastle Army Air Base.
Newcastle?
Yeah,
Okay.
in Wilmington.
In Wilmington, Delaware?
Delaware, yeah.
As a matter of fact, now in the year of 2003, I recall flying over that area, and now they have C-17s and the big jet aircraft going
right,
somewhere around
right.
Delaware, Dover, I guess it was. Now, is Newcastle anywhere around Dover?
Well,
It's got to be around there because Delaware is such a small place.
state, yeah.
Okay. So then after that, you say you went to the Douglas Aircraft Factory School?
Yes, we went to the Douglas.
How was that experience?
It was a very good experience. Actually, my experience in the service was very good. And,
Did you have civilian instructors
oh, yes.
at the Douglas
Oh,
Aircraft?
yes, yes.
Okay. But so far as Newcastle is concerned, that was strictly military?
That was military, yes.
Okay.
But we had civilian workers on the base.
You had civilian?
Yeah, there were civilian mechanics, too, on the
So
base.
if you had a hitch if you had a problem with one of these aircraft, it was common for a civilian to come down and...
Oh, no,
Come
no,
out.
we had our own, because I was an assistant line chief, but we had the engineering officer, the line chief, and we had several people who were, that we could turn to in case of problem. And, we had extensive tech orders, which had diagrams of every system, and also troubleshooting sections, where if a certain thing was happening, most of the things I think we knew what was wrong. There were only certain things that usually went wrong. But if there was a problem, you could look it up in a textbook too. That, certain things reacting this way, what seems to be the problem with it, and so forth and so on. And
You were able to read those diagrams and...
oh yes,
and follow the...
it was amazing how
Follow the
simple
schematic.
they were to follow.
Really?
Yeah, very, very fine work they had done on these things.
So tell us, you went to 4 weeks at the... Let me see. You went to the Douglas Aircraft School, it says here 1946.
46?
I don't know if I'm reading this correctly. It was 4 weeks, 1946. Now,
That couldn't have been 46. Maybe that's a mistake on there.
possibly could be.
Yeah.
The war was still raging during this time, wasn't it?
No, the war was over in
45.
45, yeah.
Yeah.
No, that was before 46 that I went there.
Yeah. No, I'm saying while you were at going through all of the training,
Right,
the war was pretty well
yes.
raging. What were your feelings about the war?
Well, like everybody else, we had to win the war.
You had to do your duty.
Yeah. This was our country, and we had to win the war.
During the period between the time you went in and the time that you were in Santa Monica, 1943, did you have any occasion to repair aircraft that had been in the service, had been in the wars, needed repair, coming back from Europe or stuff like that?
Yeah, occasionally. Occasionally.
Did you have occasion to interact with the crews of the aircraft?
Not so much.
Not so much?
Yeah, not so much,
Okay.
unless we had a question for them, or we asked the crew chief or the pilot if something was not too clear.
Okay.
And then what we'd do is we'd pre-flight the airplane after we thought we had corrected if it was an engine problem. And also if a major overhaul was done in the hangar, when the airplane would come out, we would also pre-flight the engines, run the engines, check them out on the ground. And if necessary, we would we would go up, pilot, co-pilot, and myself as a flight engineer, and check things out in the air under, different atmospheric pressure. I remember adjusting some things in the air under the belly of inside the belly of the plane. I don't remember what they were now.
Okay.
But, it was mainly just a check out. It was not a major thing.
So you did some flying.
Yeah.
Now, you say the modern aircraft at that time was a C-54, which is a cargo plane, is that
Right.
it? And can you tell us anything about what was so modern about this aircraft that was different?
Well, actually, the C-54 was very similar to the C-47. The C-47 was a two-engine workhorse with a tail wheel. It did not have a nose wheel. That was also a Douglas airplane.
Yes.
Those airplanes are still flying today.
Yes.
And so are C-54s. But you hear more about the DC-3,
DC-3 or the C-47.
C-47, right. The C-47 was essentially an improvement, probably, bigger, and it has a nose gear. It has nose gear, so
That's
it has
a
a tricycle
C-54,
landing gear. Yeah. And a very easy airplane to handle. Had a nose steering wheel on the pilot side. And you can steer that airplane with 1 foot to spare on each side of the wing, as long as you had somebody on the ends of the wings on the ground guiding you. It was a very sensitive, very fine steering system. That was
So you steered it with a handle rather
yeah,
than
it
with your
was a
feet?
little wheel on your side, on the side of the pilot, on the left-hand side of the pilot. And it was just a very fine flying airplane.
And they were used in the Berlin airlift pretty
They were
extensively.
using the Berlin airlift, right.
Right, right. And when the Berlin airlift, long after you got out of the service, was used for when the C-54 was used for the Berlin airlift, what did you think? Did you have flashbacks to?
Yeah, there's a little touch of nostalgia when you see, even today, when I see a C-54 in a picture, or I don't know where I saw one, in the last few years. I think probably at an air show or something.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, they have a C-54 called the Berlin airlift
Is
that
that
visits around Massachusetts once in a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. How was the endurance of that plane? Was it a pretty solid plane?
Great airplane, yeah.
Yeah. And was its how much more was its capacity than the C-47 two-engine job? Did it have the capacity to sustain that Berlin airlift, you think?
Oh, yeah, it was quite a bit bigger. Quite a bit bigger.
Okay, all right.
In fact, it was a pretty good-sized airplane for that day.
Okay. Now, so is it fair to say that after 1943, you were pretty much a crew chief on a C-54 and stayed with it?
Since when?
Since you got out of Newcastle and went to the Douglas Aircraft Factory School in Santa Monica.
Yeah, then I came back again to
Came back
Newcastle.
to
Yes.
Newcastle,
Yeah. And I was a crew chief.
crew chief on a C-54.
Yeah,
Was that until the end of the war?
yes.
Now, you got out, you separated in February 13, 1946.
Right.
Do you recall when the war ended in April of 45, what you were doing? Very shortly after President Roosevelt died.
I remember VE Day. We went to Philadelphia. There was all kinds of excitement. Wilmington, of course, was a small town, but there was a lot of excitement there. We were part of the excitement. No, VJ Day. VJ Day. VE Day. No, we were. I think we were just come off of a flight or something, and they said that Europe is the war is over in Europe, or I remember I was in an airplane, either we were running the engines or something, and it came over the radio that the war was over in Europe. But we were sort of expecting that anyway. That seemed like, the last month or two, it seemed like, any day now.
Do you remember the day that President Roosevelt died?
Oh, yes.
What were you doing then?
I think I was in Wilmington downtown with a couple of buddies, and we had gone to the USO, and I think that's where we got the word that Roosevelt had died, and it was a pretty sad day.
Yeah, yeah. That didn't affect your performing your duties?
Oh, no.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so VJ Day, of course, was August of 1945.
Right.
And you recall celebrating that in Philadelphia, did you?
Was that August of 45?
August of 45.
Yeah.
I think we dropped the atom bomb on
Yeah.
somewhere around August 15 of 1945, if my memory serves me correct.
Exact date.
But you went to Philadelphia to celebrate
Yeah, a
that?
group of us went to Philadelphia. We thought there'd be a lot of commotion and excitement up there, so we went up there. And everybody was out in the streets cheering.
Did you have each one of you have a vehicle during those
Oh, no.
days?
No.
Because having a car on an Air Force base today is pretty much mandatory because you
Oh.
can't walk from one place to the other.
We used to hitchhike.
You did? Okay. And you hadn't access to Jeeps or anything like that?
Not off base, no.
Or on base?
On base, yes.
On base you had Jeeps,
Oh,
yeah. Okay. So tell us what led to your separation on February 13, 1946.
Well, I can remember exactly. I was on top of an engine that was running, and I was making some sort of an adjustment.
The engine was running and you were on top of it?
Yeah. Well, we weren't flying. We were on the ground.
Yeah.
That was, we had the cowling off.
Yeah.
And I think I was making an adjustment on the carburetor. I'm not sure now, but I know that the cowling was off, and I was sitting up there and making the adjustment and listening to what they were trying to get the message from the crew that, it was okay, or a little more, a little less.
Yeah.
And somebody came in front of the in front of the engine and is yelling something to me. He's going like this. He's pointing.
Yeah.
And I said, what the heck does this guy mean? So anyway, we shut the engine down. We were through. He says, "You're going home." My name had come up for separation.
Because this was 42, 43, 44, 45. That would be 3 years, roughly 3 years and 2 months.
Yeah.
Okay. But you had signed up for the duration of the war.
Right.
Okay.
Plus.
And the war was over. You had signed up plus?
Well, the war plus 6 months.
Could they have
That
kept
was
you
the,
longer if they wanted to?
Oh, I suppose they could have. Yeah.
So they said you were going home.
Yeah.
And how did you feel about that?
Mixed feelings. It was good to be going home. But then again, these guys are my brothers.
Yeah.
I was leaving my brothers,
Yes. Yeah,
And,
I can understand that.
yeah,
Because every time you leave one base and go to another base, you don't always go with the same buddies, do you?
yeah.
So you
Well,
lose
I
your
was
old
at this base 2 years, more or less. And we were very close friends.
So parting was kind of mixed.
Oh, yeah. We went to Fort Dix to get separated. And it was in the chapel there that we went through the formalities. And when we came out, there were more than a few tears and hugs.
Yeah.
And
Have you ever seen these friends of yours since?
I bumped into one fellow in New York one day. I think he's the only one I ever saw after that. There was never a reunion from my gang. I called a couple of guys, couple of years after the war, just to say hello and so forth.
Yeah.
But that was
But
it.
you had good feelings with them, but you were
Oh,
separated,
yeah.
and that was it.
Yeah, we're like brothers.
Uh-huh. All right, so when you separated, you came back home
Yep.
to Waltham, Mass.
Yes.
Okay. What happened after that? Did you take advantage of the GI Bill?
I took some night courses. I had to work. My family needed me. And I did take some night classes at Northeastern and so forth.
Did you follow your education and training into the field of aircraft mechanics?
No,
or-
I didn't.
Yeah, yeah.
No, I didn't.
Didn't have any interest there?
Well,
Or was it a financial consideration that drove you?
I was offered a civilian job with the Air Corps in Westover, at Westover, in Springfield area, Holyoke.
What did they have at Westover?
Well, I've never been there. I was offered the job, but I guess I wanted to go in business for myself or do something like that, you know.
Okay,
So
all right. And so what did you do to go on as a career after the war?
well, I started a cleaning business, house to house, pick up, take it into a plant. And then I had an offer to, a friend of ours had it was in the dress business. They made very fine dresses and suits, the finest in Boston. And he offered me the opportunity to go in and learn how to become a dress designer, which was the last thing in my mind. I never thought of anything like that, but he said it'll be a good career. He says you have to work, you're not going to college and so forth. And I did.
So you became a dress designer?
Yep.
Okay. How long did it take you to become a dress designer?
It takes a few years.
It does.
And then I opened my own company,
What was that company called?
Edward Mesrobian. And that was the label.
Oh, in other words, you went into your own company
Right.
designing dresses?
Yeah, I designed.
What kind of dresses were these?
Well, these were designer dresses, actually. They were upper end.
Okay, so you were in the dress designing business,
Right.
and how long were you in that business? Till you retired? Are you retired now?
Yes.
Do you still do any of that work?
Yeah, I do. I have some special customers, private customers, and my wife and 2 daughters.
Oh, yes. Tell me, what was it that attracted you to go from being an aircraft mechanic to designing dresses? There must have been something there.
Well, I thought it was a chance for a career. And I was starting to do pretty good in the dry cleaning, but I thought this was a better deal. And I was interested in art and so forth. And so
That's where you went, and that's what became your life's business.
Yeah.
When did you join the Corporal Paul Mesrobian Post 41 at the AMVETS in Watertown? Any idea?
that was maybe 50 years ago.
50.
I think so, towards the beginning of it.
Somewhere around 1953, 52. Do you remember who the commander was during those days?
I remember Casey Bajoyan. I don't know if he was the
Yes.
commander or not. Of course, I knew Casey anyway.
Of course, Casey was in the Army Air Corps too, wasn't he?
Jimmy was, I know.
Jimmy was, and Casey was too.
Oh, Casey was too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you ever talked over your experiences with them?
Well, I know them very well. No, we never really talked about experiences.
Yeah.
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 I think Jimmy was a bombardier, if I'm not mistaken.
I think I was a flight officer, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
a bombardier navigator.
Mhm.
And
So, what led you to join a veterans post during those years? I mean, this is like 7 years after you had gotten out of the service.
well, I guess I had friends in it. And as a veteran, I thought, probably the thing to do.
It was a popular thing to do.
Yeah.
Also
it was
during
the thing
those
to
days.
do. Get to know the guys, sure.
And did you serve as an officer or
No.
any other?
No.
But you enjoyed your friendship with everybody?
Oh, yes, yeah.
Did you follow veterans issues?
Somewhat.
But mostly you met once a month, did you?
Well, at that time, it was in for a short time, and then after that, I got busy with the business, and my time was very limited.
How do you find your association with Post 41 here now?
Well, Post 41, I know most of the guys since World War II.
Right.
And I enjoy their company. They're a great bunch of guys. We're all in our late 30s. So we have a lot in common.
All right. Now, I'm gonna show you some of the photographs that you brought here,
Yeah.
and ask you to. I'm gonna put this in front of the camera while you describe it.
Okay.
But I'll give you the picture and ask you to describe this picture that I hand you. Hold on now. Just take a look at it first, okay? All right. Now give it to me, and I'll put it in front of the camera.
Yeah.
Now, I'll ask you to describe that picture. What was that show?
Yeah, that was in back of our barracks.
And you're the one on the, as I'm looking at it, you're the one with the
Flight
leather
jacket.
flight jacket.
Yeah.
And there is another person, looks like a lieutenant, with his arms folded.
He was an enlisted man. He was the,
He was enlisted?
yeah, he was a barracks chief.
Okay.
He had the ATC insignia on his cap. That's
Oh,
what
I
he-
see.
yeah.
Okay. And that's in back of your barracks. Where are you? Where are you here?
In Wilmington,
In Wilmington, Delaware.
Newcastle Air Base.
Okay. With Newcastle Air Base. Okay. All right. So that's one. Here's another photograph that you brought. Just take a look at it,
Yeah.
and then I'll have you
Okay.
speak with regard to the picture, and I'll put the picture in front of the camera. And I'll ask you, there's 3 people in front
Yeah.
and 3 people in back. I think you're the one on the extreme right-hand side as I'm looking at the picture.
Right.
And you have that's a pretty warm jacket, isn't it?
That was a warm jacket. We had the pants to go with it, the boots to go with it, and the hat to go with it, and the gloves to go with it.
Was it a cold day?
No, it was a cool day,
Yeah. Okay.
and
So who are these people in this picture?
they were, flight crew and engineers, flight engineers, crew chiefs.
Uh-huh. And where is this taken? Also at Newcastle?
Also at the same place in Newcastle.
Okay. So you had pretty dark black hair in those days, didn't you?
Yeah,
Okay.
most of us did.
You're on the right end, or you're on the right-hand side, standing up.
The good-looking one.
Yeah. All right. Very good. All right. Now, I'll have you take a look at this picture.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is my crew.
Okay.
Yeah, this is my crew.
This is the crew that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 people, huh?
Yeah, we were the, that was my crew, Mesrobian crew. And
And where are you here?
I'm top left, I think.
Yes. And you are all pictured under an aircraft called the Californian.
Yeah,
Is that a civilian aircraft?
no, that's not a civilian aircraft. That's a military C-54, and they were giving them names at that time.
Mhm.
There was the California, and there was the Caravan, there were,
So this was like Nozart. Instead of having beautiful women,
right.
you had this Nozart put on the
Yeah,
nose
that
of
sort
your
of thing, decoration, yeah.
So this is a military
little
aircraft.
color.
Yeah. And where was this taken?
Again, Newcastle Air Base on the
Newcastle.
flight line, yeah.
Okay.
On the
So
tarmac.
you have good memories of the people you served with, is that
Yeah.
correct? Okay. Now, is there anything that I haven't covered that you would like to comment on with regard to your service? Your entry into the service, your experience in the service, and your exit from the service?
Looking back on it, and even then,
Mhm.
I was very proud and very glad to serve my country. My country opened its arms to people like my father and his generation who escaped from bad situations in their country, genocides and so forth. And many of the people who came to this country left to better themselves, to get away from bad situations. This has been and is a wonderful country with open arms. A symbol of that is when you look at the Statue of Liberty. I mean, it has a pull on you. It does on me. And
Did you feel when you were serving your country that you were in some way repaying the country for the benefits they bestowed on your family?
I guess so.
Kind of a background.
Yes, I
background
would
feeling.
imagine that was background feeling. And also my father had said, always told us, growing up, that by being born on this soil, we were very wealthy in every way, just by being born. And he didn't mean in the terms of
Monetary.
money.
Yeah.
Just the privileges, the liberty, the freedom. And he says, we owe a lot to this country. And when I wanted to go in, I said to my mother, I'm going to go into the Air Corps. She says, oh no, your father will not let you go. In those days, we had to ask our father, because I was not being drafted yet. And, we had to ask our father for permission. Today, that stuff is sort of gone, but in those days, Daddy was the authority around the
Oh,
house.
yes. Yeah.
So
When you asked him, what did he say?
I asked him first, he said, are you crazy? He said, this is not a game.
Yeah.
And he says, they probably won't take you for a long time yet, maybe a year.
Yeah.
And so I gave him the big patriotic speech that he used to give us, how
Yeah.
we should be grateful to this country. And
You gave his words back to
I
him.
gave his words back to him.
Yeah. And he felt himself trapped.
He was quiet for
Yeah.
a moment,
Yeah.
and then he said, I said those words and I meant those words.
Yeah.
But he says, it's very hard to give your son permission to go to war. But however, he said, if I say no now, and you're drafted later on, and something happens to you, I wonder if I should have let you go before. Maybe nothing would have happened. But
Yeah.
anyway, he says, I admire your feelings, and he says, they are my feelings. He says, you have my blessings.
How about your brothers?
My brother volunteered too, but he was 3 years younger than me, so when he went in, the war was just about winding down.
Just about over?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So you had no other relatives that were already in the service that gave you their ideas as to what you should do before you enlisted?
Well, I had cousins that were in, and I was very proud of them,
Yeah.
There were maybe 2 or 3 years, 4 years older than me, and I sort of looked up to them. And
Did you consult with them before you enlisted?
yeah,
What did they say?
well, in those days, there was no question that we should go,
Yeah.
to go and join up and.
You had no feelings of
serve our-
protest?
Huh?
You had no feelings of protesting against the government or becoming politically involved?
No, there was no feelings like that then.
There wasn't?
I don't remember any feelings of anybody having protest feelings towards the government.
Because there were elections that came up quite often, every 4 years for the
Yeah.
president. You were always in tune with President Roosevelt's decrees and so forth.
Well, from the world, the way I saw it then, everybody was gung-ho about joining up, and we had to fight these terrible people.
And how were your feelings with regard to your officers that were in charge? Did you feel that they were qualified and respected?
For the most part, yes.
You had no feelings of animosity towards your officers?
You know something, I was so dedicated to what I was doing. I knew there were people
Looking over your shoulder?
dying in this war, and I had a job of maintaining airplanes. And I wasn't bothered by, petty things like if an officer looked at me funny or something. There was no such thing anyway. They were fine. I did my work, and I wanted to get this, do whatever I could do in my capacity.
Yeah.
And to help those guys that were on the front.
Okay. Well, if that's it,
Yeah.
we'll proceed to close. And I'll just join you here to
Okay.
close this interview. And what I want to say is that the feelings and the attitude that veterans had during World War II are quite similar to yours. There were no protests, there were no anti-war protests.
No way.
We followed what we had to do. Probably that's because we knew what our duty was, and we did our duty. As Americans, we appreciated the freedoms that we have in this country, which brings me to the last point in closing, and that is that in the year 2003, there's a common feeling going around now, and a slogan, that freedom is not free. We are not given freedom in this country of ours, especially during these times, without demanding sacrifices. Freedom is not free, it demands sacrifices. Sacrifices in time, sacrifices in career sometimes, sacrifices today. People are fighting, we are defending the freedom of people in Iraq. We have lost 300 or 400 soldiers by accidental or combat injuries. So freedom is not free. It demands sacrifice and it demands work, and especially these days, not just military-wise, but it also demands political involvement. It demands teaching the lessons of freedom, free enterprise, and the democratic process. The United States of America is very, very fortunate to have developed that type of process that allows us to enjoy these freedoms of today. So, if that's it, this is Major Greg Arabian, Oral History Director of the Corporal Paul S. Mesrobian AMVETS Post 41, signing off and thanking you very much
My
for your
pleasure.
interview. Okay, we'll end it off here. Just for the record, this is Wednesday. It's a dreary Wednesday, November 19, 2003, in Watertown, Massachusetts. Very good.